Hello, everyone. My name is Ton-Quinlivan. I'm CEO of Futuro Health. I'm delighted you could join me today for a workshop on 5 tips for making the journey from immigrant to thought leader. I'm so delighted to have a chance to share some of my personal story and some of my learnings and to be able to pay it forward. And hopefully what you'll find by the end of this session is that you'll have some tips and strategies for making a similar journey if that is what you so desire. A quick background on what I'm doing these days. I've had a career that has spanned the private sector, the public sector, and now the nonprofit sector. Here in the nonprofit sector, I launched Futuro Health, which is a nonprofit that was established with $130 million in commitment from Kaiser, Permanente, and SEIU-United healthcare workers. So we really focused on bringing members from the community into new allied health careers, because even California alone has a shortage of 500,000 allied health workers. And we want to be able to improve the health and wealth of communities by growing the largest network of credentialed workers in the nation, starting in California. You may have a question on what is allied health. It's basically all the individuals, healthcare providers who would touch you, for example, should you be in a car accident, the emergency medical technician that comes to meet you at your car, to the medical assistant who checks you in at the hospital, to the folks who take your x-ray, everybody all the way until you exit the hospital, minus the doctors and some of the nurses. They are all allied health workers. And they're trained mostly through credentials that are more than a high school degree, but less than a bachelor's degree. Well, we're going to come back to Futuro Health, and I do have an ask of you at the end of this presentation, but let's talk about your journey and are there some tips that can help you get to this point where you are a thought leader as well? So a little bit background on myself. We all come by many labels, and I want to share with you some of the labels that I hold, because maybe we share some of those in common. So the first one is the label of change maker. I was named White House Champion of Change by the Obama administration for leading transformation in higher education. I was also named California Steward Leader for bringing together the private, public, and civic sectors in support of social mobility for residents throughout the state. And I was named Sacramento Magazine's Powered by Women as a leader who inspires positive change. And here's a wonderful set of pictures of students here on the left, the makerspace, where these were reforms that I had put in place to help students learn these skill sets in the community colleges, which in California is the largest system in the nation. And that work also brought me to the White House here. I'm posing with incoming First Lady Joe Biden. Now let's talk about a second label that I go by, executive. Some of you may have this label. So as an executive, I mentioned that my career spanned both the private and the public sector, and now in the nonprofit. When I was in government, I served as Executive Vice Chancellor, driving the workforce mission of the California community colleges, as I mentioned, the largest system of higher education in the nation. And I oversaw its growth from $100 million to over $1 billion by the time that I left. And in the private sector, prior to that, I was head of workforce development for a company of 20,000 men and women. I took the company from having no opinion in workforce development to becoming a nationally recognized industry best practice. So executive is another label that I go by. Now here's a label maybe many of you can feel affinity with: spouse and a parent. So my husband and I have been married for over 20 years. We have 2 teenagers, ages 17 and 13, and share all the journeys of a parent and a spouse with all of you. And then I want to share one more label that I go by, and it is the label of immigrant. So in 1975, the war displaced my family, and I became an immigrant to this country as a first generation. immigrant. So this label has meaning because it lets you know that my journey began at the very starting line, or maybe even behind the starting line. And if I could find my way to becoming a change maker, an executive, a spouse, and a parent, you can too, if you so desire. See, in 1975, war displaced my parents from what they knew. And with 3 small children in tow, including me, my family escaped out of Vietnam and arrived in the United States with not much more than the clothes that they had on our back. So growing up, I remember how hard it was for my parents who had to work to make ends meet. And interestingly enough, they never expressed regret for what they lost. Rather, they were always grateful for the opportunity ahead. And so, not surprisingly, my parents could not give us much advice on how to navigate career and life since they were new to the American way. So after I finished college, I ambled into my journey of work and life, uncovering tips along the way. And so if you're interested, I would like to pay these forward to you today for your consideration. So 5 tips. Let me start with the first one. The first one, I actually learned this phrase doing my MBA at Stanford University. Tame your internal voice of judgment. Tame your internal voice of judgment. You know, the loudest voice that keeps you from realizing your own potential is not that of your boss, not of your parents, not of your spouse, but really it's your own voice. Like, do you have times when in your head you're hearing this voice of judgment speaking to encourage, not to encourage you, but really discourage you? You know, does it say, I'm not good enough, I'm not ready, I don't look the part, or if I try this, I'm going to fail and look foolish? I remember my voice of judgment as a Vietnamese female having a real cultural overlay, always telling me that I was not acting proper for what is expected of a female in Vietnamese culture. I remember also that this voice of judgment played out at one time when I was at work. It was so loud that I blurted out, oh, I can't, I've never done it before. And thank goodness, in a moment of coaching, my wise and patient boss replied back, you'll figure it out. And he was right. I did figure it out with some help, that is. And so, interestingly enough, in the future work, many things will need to be figured out. And retraining your voice of judgment to encourage and not discourage is going to be a really important tip. So tame your internal voice of judgment. Tip number 2, broaden and deepen your expertise. You know, you're at this event because you have a solid foundation on which you base your career journey. Don't stop there. Keep learning. Stay current. There are so many ways. And remember to ask your supervisors and mentors for projects. For example, I'm interested in working with the company's biggest clients in order to get that experience. Or I want to have a global assignment or project. Or I want to work on digital transformation. Remember, it's really important to ask, because that's how someone's going to help create the opportunity for you. And don't limit your learning to just opportunities that are inside your organization. Attend workshops and conferences, take online courses to round out your knowledge, do pro bono work, and serve on commissions and nonprofit boards. These are all different ways to learn. My road to becoming an expert took the latter, more nonlinear route as well. I started with a desire to better understand community colleges and its role in workforce development. Then I committed time to reading the research. Then I did pro bono work, volunteer work, essentially. Then I began to serve on commissions and boards that related to the topic of community colleges. And before turning, and did all this before turning the work into my day job. And this was my learning journey. And it got me positioned with the expertise and the social network, you know, the professional network, to be the best person for the job when the job became available as Executive Vice Chancellor. And it was the people whom I met along the way who recommended me for the opportunities. And those opportunities never appeared on any job boards. So again, tip number 2, broaden and deepen your expertise. So hopefully these are some useful tips. Tip number 3, do collect mentors along the way. And I will tell you, my mentors don't look like me. My 2-time boss and mentor was a man, Peter Darby, who was chief financial officer in his 40s when I first worked for him. And he hired me again when he became CEO of a big company. Marsha Johnson was chief human resources officer of the Southern Company and a prominent African-American leader in Atlanta. And we met through an executive development program. Gail Shetler had stepped down as lieutenant governor of Colorado and got paired with me in a mentoring program for executive women who were mid-career. Gail Shetler gave me my first tutorial on how to navigate government. See, my mentors were of different ages, different ethnicities, different genders, different experiences, different strengths, and lived even in different states. And thanks to all of them, I made better decisions in navigating career and life. And really, I avoided common potholes. So do collect mentors along the way. Tip number 4, feedback is a gift. I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but feedback is truly a gift. Yes, this one is tough. You don't have to 100% agree with the feedback, but if it comes from a person of credibility, what I mean is it's not coming from some random social media person, it is important to take it graciously and simply say thank you. After you emotionally process it, take the time to discern whether there is a nugget of truth in what you heard. So back when I was a newly minted MBA, Peter Darby, my mentor, told me I seemed nervous. I was too quiet during business meetings and that my voice trembled. I said thank you, and he actually offered to send me to a public speaking coach, which I used. Let me give you another example. Later in my career, Marsha Johnson observed that I was repeating an unhelpful behavior that was holding me back. And I said, thank you. And I began to work on breaking that cycle. And once I actually broke that cycle, great opportunities started coming before me, and I was able to do great things. So feedback is a gift. Do learn to say thank you. Number 5, this is maybe the scariest of all, which is to intersect the future. You know, we're all very busy in the here and now, but don't forget to look up and outwards in the 10-year future. Consider what might look different when your profession or your organization or your industry, how will it look in that future of work? So play along with me for a second, will you? So just imagine, what if in the 10-year future, everything rote and repetitive in your profession is automated and done by machines? What kind of work will really value the human touch? Your colleagues can be humans, robots, or avatars. What skills would make you a good colleague to them? Let's imagine technology platforms and their algorithms become the new middle management to assign and match work. This means your online reputation is a must, not a nice to have, because your reputation data is what an algorithm can read, how others rate you, what experiences are in your portfolio, your demonstrated competencies, your earned credentials, your ability to display who you are connected with and who you can influence, and so on. How will you build your online reputation? Next, you self-identify through a personalized learning record not tied to any education institution or employers. So by scanning in your personal QR code, an employer can see your skills, experiences, formal and informal education and training, all verified and recorded in blockchain. How will you engage in lifelong learning in a way that differentiates you from other candidates? Workers increasingly go independent. Being independent comes so commonplace that people will no longer say they go to work. because that implies an outdated notion that work is a physical location with a physical boss. Instead, people will say they do work without expectations of going anywhere physical, like in the pandemic. What do you know about being your own business? Environmental stressors have become so pronounced that carbon emission becomes strictly enforced. How would work occur differently? Perhaps a virtual world becomes where you collaborate. And how skilled are you? Because of distrust of the pervasive use of algorithms, organizations that emphasize transparency in their culture begin to stand out in a good way. What if everything you type and everything you text for work becomes visible to the rest of the organization? Privacy norms will have changed. What do you think? All right, I shared with you all these possibilities in the 10-year future of work. Let me roll you back to the here and now. What would you do differently to future-proof yourself and your organization for this future world of work? So remember, it's important to intersect the future, and that often takes a moment of reflection to look ahead so that you can intersect it. So hopefully these five tips can be of help to you. Tame your voice of judgment. Remember, you got this. Broaden and deepen your expertise, especially skills that are valued in the future. Collect mentors along the way. Take feedback as a gift. And lastly, intersect the future. Periodically look ahead even as you focus on today. And do remember, we are all immigrants into the future. Hopefully these 5 tips are of great help to you, as they were lessons learned through my journey from immigrant to thought leader. And I also want to share with you another way that you can expand your knowledge and look ahead into the future work. We launched a podcast series called Workforce RX with Futuro Health. And in there, I interview leaders and innovators who are thinking ahead about the future of work, the future of education, the future of care. And you can download these podcasts wherever you normally listen to them, or at this link that I provide here. But this is another way to get yourself thinking about what's coming ahead so that you can intersect the future. So enjoy these podcasts. So before I end, I wanted to mention something that I spoke about at the very beginning, which is the importance of having a good healthcare workforce for every community. This pandemic has certainly shown that there has been disparity of healthcare outcomes. And it starts being addressed by making sure that all communities have a proportional share of diverse and qualified healthcare workers in their own backyard. And in California alone, by 2024, it's expected that we'll need 500,000 new healthcare workers to serve the increasingly growing and graying population. And so a campaign that we have right now under tunuevofuturo.com is to invite 1,000 bilingual Spanish speakers to consider healthcare careers, starting with taking a free language training course. The training course is all about learning vocabulary that is important to healthcare careers. And we hope that you can help get this link and get the word out. The course is free. It's done at one's own pace on a mobile device. For example, if you're in between cooking or waiting for the careers or in between jobs, if we all want better equity in healthcare, we need workers to look like the communities they serve. If you can write down 3 names, take a screenshot, take a screenshot of this a slide here, pass it along to these 3 people, I would so appreciate it, because you will be passing along opportunity for them and joining me in paying it forward. So thank you again for spending time with me to think about the journey from immigrant to thought leaders. And I hope that the 5 tips were of help to you. And I really appreciate your help in advance to pass this URL on to 3 people who are bilingual Spanish who may consider careers in healthcare. Thank you.